I've introduced reactive extensions previously on my channel, but I want to get into demonstrating more examples of reactive extensions so that you can wrap your head around it more and see how you can implement reactive extensions in your own application to solve various problems. So this time I'm going to demonstrate how to implement an asynchronous search via reactive extensions. So here in our demo project, let me introduce this. This is actually a WPF project. That's what we're going to use. And right now our application does not use reactive extensions. So let me run this. And right off the bat, what we do is we load this main view model. And what that does is execute this search catfax command. So let's step into that. Whoops, looks like I can't do that, but let me put, oh yeah, I can. Okay. So we execute this search catfax command, and that sets our view model to loading. And then we start executing this catfax query, passing in a search term from our view model. So let's continue here and let that execute. And then when that query finishes, it takes about 1 to 2 seconds because we are hitting a REST API to get the catfax. But we get our catfax back and we pass those to the view model. So let's continue. And then we display all of the catfax on our UI. Now, if we want to search for specific catfax, we can use this text box up here. So let's do a search. Let's search for main. Oh, right when we start typing, it executes the search. All right, we typed in M. So we changed this search property to M because that's what we typed in. But now we're going to execute this search catfax command. So let's step into this. And now again, we're executing our search catfax command, but this time our search query is M. So we're going to get catfax that contain uppercase M. And here we go. Took some time. We get our catfax back and we simply update the UI. So we probably didn't filter out too many. Let me remove this breakpoint. So we should have no breakpoints now. And I wanted to type in main for a main coon cat. And here we go. We just get catfax that match or contain main. So in trying to demo this, you may have already noticed the issue that we kind of have here with our search behavior. So every time I type into this text box, it kicks off a search, which is unnecessary because, you know, maybe we should wait for the user to actually finish what they're typing so that we don't end up executing tons of HTTP requests that we don't even need. The other issue with this approach is that we actually get some weird behavior with these loading states. So if I put a breakpoint here and start typing, so our first query finished and we're about to set is loading to false, but the other queries from the other letters we typed are still executing. So we're going to show the list view even though we are still loading. So if I continue here, we're not going to be able to see it because we had that breakpoint and we did let the other queries finish. But if I type a bunch, then we set loading to false, and then we could see the list view change before our eyes, when in reality we should have just left that loading prompt stay while those other queries were executing. And then the other issue I have is that this list of catfax is extremely long, and I should probably paginate it or something, but for this demo we're just going to let it stay extremely long and focus on the other issues that we have. So before we even get into fixing our issues, let's make our application reactive with reactive extensions. So actually I don't even have reactive extensions installed, so let's go ahead and manage NuGet packages real quick and search for SYSTEM.REACTIVE and let's install that. And there we go. So let's head into our main view model. And in order to really use reactive extensions, we have to figure out what our asynchronous data stream is going to be that we want to observe on. So in our case, we want to observe on the user typing into the search text box. So really we need to observe on whenever this search property on our view model changes. And that's actually going to be pretty easy to do because we call onPropertyChanged for this search property. And what this function does is raises this property changed event for the property that it changes. And the main purpose of this is to tell the UI for our WPF application to update with the new value for our property. So this is really a WPF MVVM feature, but we can utilize this for reactive extensions too. So we need to create an observable that's going to observe on this property changed event being raised. So there's actually a built-in reactive extensions observable to accomplish that. So we can do observable, so import that. And we want to do FromEventPattern. And with this method, we're going to tell reactive extensions to pretty much subscribe to this event using a handler. So how this function works is Reactive Extensions passes us the handler with a callback, and we just have to take our property changed event and subscribe with that handler. And then the second part of this function is that we have to tell Reactive Extensions how to unsubscribe from our event. So that's pretty straightforward. So we can just copy this, and for unsubscribing in .NET we just do a -equals. Now we also have to tell Reactive Extensions the type of our event handler and event args. So let's specify some type parameters that we can pass to FromEventPattern, and I believe we want the handler type, so property changed event handler, and the event args type, so that's property changed event args. Let's use those, and there we go, all good now. So now with this, we'll be able to listen to any property changes on our view model, but in our case, we really only care about the search property changing, because that's when we actually want to execute the search catfax command. So let's do a filter here to only be notified for the search property changing. So we can do a where operator here, and we'll specify our predicate, getting our event passed in. So let's grab the event args of that event, and let's look at the property name, and we only want to deal with the search property. So we want property name to equal the name of search. And now we can subscribe to this. So let's subscribe, and whenever we're notified of the search property changing, we're going to execute this search catfax command. So let's move that out of the setter and into our subscribe callback. We got to specify a parameter here so that it knows that this is the onNext callback for our observer. And with that, we'll be executing our command whenever the search query changes. So let's test this out. Again, no real functionality changes here, just making sure we're using reactive extensions. So let's type something, and there we go. We're going to execute our command, and we get our catfax. And real quick, before we get into the fun stuff and fixing our issues, we're going to have to dispose of this subscription, because this is a long-living observable. So in other words, nothing is ever going to tell this observable to complete, so we're going to have to manually dispose of it. So this subscribe method returns an iDisposable to unsubscribe. So let's get that. We'll call it dispose search observable, and we'll just throw that into a read-only field. And I'm not actually going to dispose of this because we don't really have a point in our application where we dispose of this main view model, because it lives the entire lifetime of the application. But I did just want to point out that some observables do need to be manually disposed. So now that we're using reactive extensions here, and we have our observable on that search input, we can get into fixing our first issue. So that issue is that we execute this search catfax command every single time we type into that search text box, even if we're not really finished typing. So what I want to do is wait for the user to stop typing for at least 1 second before executing this command. So if they stop typing for more than 1 second, we'll know that they're done typing and they have their search finalized, and then we'll execute the search. So there's actually a reactive extensions operator to do exactly that, and that is called Throttle. So what Throttle does is, if it receives an element from our observable and another element comes through within whatever time span we specify, then it drops the previous element. So this will ensure that we wait for the user to finish typing before executing the search, and we want to wait for 1 second. So we'll do from seconds 1. So let's put a breakpoint here. Actually, let me make this longer just to demo it. So 3 seconds, and let me search cat. So there we go. We haven't executed our command. We wait 3 seconds, and there we go. We execute it, and we're executing with our search term of cat. And oh, we get a failed to load cats. So we threw an exception. Wonder what that could be. And it looks like that exception was thrown after our query finished, and we called update catfax on our view model. So what does that do? That updates our observable collection of catfax that are shown in the UI. So what happened here was reactive extensions pretty much handled our observable on a different thread. And when we called update catfax, we tried to update our UI from a thread that wasn't the dispatcher thread or the UI thread in WPF. So that's why we got the not supported exception. So what we need to do is tell Reactive Extensions to observe on our dispatcher thread, which is the UI thread. So for that, we can just do synchronization context and import that from system.threading.current. And we get a warning that current may be null here, but it's not going to be null because we're in a WPF application. So now if we try this, we should no longer get errors. So let me search cat, and here we go. We start executing, and this time we do not get the error, and we successfully update the UI. So now we change this throttle to just 1 second like we had wanted before. And I'm pretty satisfied with this behavior since we're now throttling the user's input. And doesn't seem like much, but implementing this without reactive extensions would be pretty cumbersome. So now getting into the other issue we had, and that is that this loading state could be set to false when we're still loading. And I still want to demonstrate that better. So let me go into this catfax query. And all right, so I do have this task delay to demonstrate stuff, but I want to make this longer. So let's make this 10 seconds. And let's try this out. Let's see if I can show off what I want to demonstrate. All right, so let's search for cat. That should give us some data back. All right, so we're executing that. But now let me change this to something random. And now we're executing that search too. So let's wait for the cat search to finish. So there we go, the cat search finished. And we set is loading to false, and we showed our list of catfax, even though that catfax query wasn't done yet. And now it's finished, and now we showed nothing. But that's the issue, we set is loading false when we're actually still executing other catfax queries. So this usually isn't an issue when you're like binding async commands to clicking a button, because in that case you'd probably just disable the button and you wouldn't let the user click again until the loading was complete. But for this, the user can just keep on typing. So we end up getting some conflicts with our view model state. So how are we going to solve this? You guessed it, with reactive extensions. So before we get into solving this, let's turn this into a reactive extensions solution. So I'm just going to do all that up here. So first off, we need to figure out, again, what are we observing on? That's the first part of creating observables. So we're simply just observing on this catfax query, and we want to do something when that query is done. So for that, we're going to do observable, let's import that, FromAsync, and all we do here is pass in the async action that we want to execute. So for that, that's just our query that we can execute with our search term from the view model. And that's actually pretty much all we want to do. Let's just subscribe to this observable now. So let's handle our data that we get back. That's the catfax. So with this catfax, we just want to update our view model. So we'll call it update catfax. And then if we get an error, let's have an error handler in here. And for that, all we want to do is show a message box. And then finally, let's handle the observable completing. So that's this onCompleted callback. And for that, we just want to set is loading to false. And finally, when we start executing this command, we still want to set is loading to true. So let's get rid of all the old stuff now. We are fully using reactive extensions for this now. And in fact, this command doesn't even have to be async anymore. So we can just make this inherit from command base instead of async command base. And these command base classes just come from my MVVM Essentials helper package. But let's implement command base real quick. So that just has an execute method, and we can move all of this into there. So no longer need to be doing anything async, and with tasks, we're simply using reactive extensions. So let's put some breakpoints down to make sure we handle our observable result. And here we go, kicking off. Oh, and I still have the long wait time on my catfax query. I guess we'll leave that since we're trying to fix the issues that arise from that. But here we go, we're going to update our catfax on the UI. Let's continue. And same thing as before, trying to update the collection of catfax on the UI from a thread that isn't our dispatcher UI thread. So we got to do the same thing as before, where we observe on the synchronization context.current. So let's do that. So before we subscribe, and let's import what we need from system.threading, And let's try this out. All right, here we go. Let's continue. And there we go. It was successful this time. And then we set isLoading to false. And our UI updates. And we get our cat facts. While many cats enjoy milk, it will give some cats diarrhea. All right, so now that we have our observable set up, I want to get into fixing the issue with this loading state. So the way we can solve this is by canceling the previous observable if we create another observable for a new search query. So just to walk through how this will work, let's put some breakpoints together. So we're executing a search right now, but if I type again, then I would just completely cancel the previous search, and then isLoading would never get set to false for that previous search because it would just be canceled and we would never even get into our observer. So what we have now is we actually execute isLoading false for the first one and then for the second one too. But again, what I want to do is just completely get rid of the previous observable and never let it hit our observer. So all we have to do for this is put our subscription into a field. We'll call it current search, and let's generate a field for that. So the first time we execute this command, we'll set current search. But then if we execute this command again, we would want to dispose of the previous current search so that our observer would never execute and we wouldn't set isLoading to false prematurely. So we can do that before we set it again. So we can take our current search, and if it's not null, then we'll dispose it, and the observer for that search will never get executed. So let's try this out. Let's see if we set isLoading to false prematurely for the first search. All right, so kicking off the first search, this is the one that we kick off when we load our app. So current search is null, so we're not going to dispose because there's nothing to dispose. So we're loading, and now let me type in a new search. So I'll just search cat, and here we go. We're disposing the previous search before it finishes. So that's disposed, which means we're not going to hit this observer for that previous search. And now we only have one search running for cat. So that search just finished. So let's continue. We update our UI. We set isLoading to false, which we can do because it's the only search running right now. And there we go, our UI updates. And I'm trying to think of how I can demo this better. So I think I can search for cat. All right, so we're executing our search. We should see a bunch of cat results, but I'm going to change to, how about AA? And since we canceled that previous search, we're not going to see a bunch of cat results at any point. So once this AA search finishes, there we go. We only get a few search terms back for Isaac Newton, which has 2 A's in Isaac. So there we go. We have successfully solved the issues with our async search. Of course, there's much more you could do with this. For example, you could have some pagination with skip and take. You could filter out cat facts that are too long or something. But those are just fun add-ons. At least we have the core functionality and our async search isn't acting strange like it was before. So just to summarize what we did, first we subscribed to our search property changing, and we throttled those changes so we only execute our search catfacts command if the user hasn't typed for 1 or more seconds. And this is good so that we don't hit the API more times than we need to. And we also wait for the user to pretty much implicitly confirm that they finished typing. And then we ran into issues where we tried to update our UI from a different thread. So we had to observe on the current synchronization context, which is the dispatcher thread, which we can update the UI from. So overall, throttled this command getting executed. But then we had issues where isLoading was set to false by other executions of this command, even though we were searching for catfacts. So what we did was we turned our query into an observable using FromAsync, and then handled the result the same as before reactive extensions. But we put our subscription into a field. So if we executed this command again, we would dispose of the previous current search, which means the previous observer would never run, and we wouldn't update the UI for a search that was no longer relevant. So hopefully this was helpful for understanding reactive extensions. Maybe it sparks some ideas of how you can implement reactive extensions in your own application, or even better, maybe this async search behavior is something that you need in your application. But if this wasn't quite helpful or it was a bit confusing, be sure to leave any questions, criticisms, or concerns in the comment section. Although if you enjoyed the video, or are enjoying the channel, consider becoming a member. Other than that, leave a like and subscribe for more. Thank you.